We're in the TechCrunch studio today with Kent Goldman, who's a partner at First Round Capital. Kent, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about the structure of First Round Capital. Obviously, I think a lot of early stage entrepreneurs have heard of you guys. As we were discussing earlier, you're 6 investment professionals across 3 cities, plus 6 colleagues working on the First Round Capital platform. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So, like most firms, we have sort of the 6. We have 6 partners, and sort of act sort of as you'd expect sort of most partners to do, sort of sourcing new investments, working closely with our founders and things of that nature. What sort of is a little bit unusual about us is we're not sort of in sort of one office down the valley. We're actually in Philadelphia, San Francisco, and New York. So we have a national presence, which is unusual for just about a fund of any size, but given that ours is $135 million, sort of relatively modest by Valley standards, it's sort of unusual to have sort of that sort of spread. And it's really, frankly, because we think sort of great founders can come from anywhere. And a nice example of that is one of our first investments that sort of really took off was StumbleUpon. And Garrett had started the company up in Calgary, of all places. So that was quick learning for us back when we just had sort of one office, that great founders really can come from anywhere. So we wanted to sort of be in a position where we can sort of work closely with sort of startup communities sort of across the country. The other thing sort of that we realized too is we're a seed fund, and so we do tend to have a much larger portfolio than most firms. Everything we do, though, is really focused on the first 18 to 24 months of a company's life. So we'll dive in, work closely with them for that formative period, and then we tend to, if we've taken a board seat, we tend to actually step off a board. So unlike other firms, we don't view the idea of taking a board seat as a board seat for life. It's a board seat for while we can be helpful, or high engagement when we think, well, we can be helpful. And so that's allowed us to sort of, while we're only 6 investment professionals, to scale our portfolio, where now it's close to about 150 active companies in the portfolio. And at a given time, each partner is probably working closely with 6 companies, which are sort of, again, going through that sort of 18 to 24 month formative period. But what we all realized was that the venture business sort of if you think about it sort of on a one-to-one basis, it just doesn't scale. And so we're forced quickly to sort of confront the realities of six partners, 150 companies. How do you sort of get the most value? How do you provide the most value to founders, and how does sort of the fund get the most value from them? And so we were forced to rethink, I think, some of the trappings of the industry. And what we realized was that we had to find a way to scale our business and tap into the incredible knowledge across the portfolio. And so I think if you talk to sort of any investor, what they'll probably tell you is sort of oftentimes the best insight that they have and the best insight they can provide for company A is something they learned while working with company B. Sort of just this knowledge transfer. And you have a benefit as an investor of seeing 6 data points or 6 companies trying to sort of work through a problem where as a founder or CEO, you're just focused on one. And so that knowledge is somewhat leverageable. And we said, what, let's try to sort of unleash or sort of like untrap some of that data and some of that knowledge. And we said, oftentimes really the best advice that a founder can get is oftentimes from another founder. So we've focused pretty heavily on trying to build a community of our founders, and so they really feel something special amongst one another when they're part of the first round portfolio. And we've put together a host of events, tools.
So let's talk about your colleagues who work on the platform.
Yeah.
Like, what different roles do they take? How did you and your partners come up with like creating those roles and recruiting for them?
Yeah. So our first platform initiative happened sort of years ago, and it was basic and pretty modest. It was a Yahoo group.
Okay.
And we put together a Yahoo group that sort of would allow any CEO and only CEOs to send a message to other CEOs in the portfolio. And it was really to sort of help them with different challenges or problems they might have in the business. And the first time that sort of anyone at First Round, this was before I joined, but the first time anyone at First Round knew that we were really onto something with that was actually right after the first, I think it was TechCrunch 40 at the time, in Mint, which was a new First Round investment, sort of won the award of sort of best in show company. And immediately sort of what happened is sort of they launched, coming out of their event, their servers were sort of melting because the demand for signups was far beyond sort of what they ever imagined. And they quickly realized that they had a MySQL problem, but they didn't know how to sort of debug it. So someone from, I think it was Aaron Patzer, got on the CEO group and sort of sent a note out to the rest of the First Round CEOs. We're having a MySQL problem. Can anyone help us get in touch with an engineer over there? And another one of the CEOs said, turns out Martin Mikos is a good friend of mine. I'll get right on that. And this was at like 4 a.m. And they had a response from someone on the MySQL team early the next morning. They got sort of back up and running, and it literally sort of like kept the company on the track that it was on, rather than sort of having the launch be an absolute disaster. So that was our first tool. And that was when we began to say, let's build out more and more things to sort of connect the CEOs. And so what you realize with a Yahoo type group, or any sort of email based group, is the knowledge just tends to be temporal. Someone asks a question, people answer it, and then it sort of scrolls off the page. So we've now begun to put together some tools that makes that knowledge sort of more searchable and more findable over time, to be sort of a real repository, a real sort of knowledge base of.
So it sounds like you guys are doing things that are sort of online connecting CEOs, and then sort of traditional offline, like getting people together.
Yeah. So like most firms, we do, we started doing CEO summits, and what we realized quickly at those, sort of having the speakers that we've had have been terrific, and we've had some amazing folks. I think last year, we had sort of Jeff Weiner come in. He gave a talk in the past. Dick Costolo's sort of given a talk. But the most interesting conversations, frankly, were the conversations that the CEOs were having with one another. So what we started doing is putting together sort of regular CEO dinners, sort of in Philly, New York, and San Francisco, so the founders there could connect with one another more often. We've started putting on, frankly, 30 events outside of the CEO Summit every year, smaller sort of workshops, tech talks, and things of that nature, to sort of bring together people, sort of, the non-executive ranks of the companies. And then this past year, we actually even did our first CTO Summit, where we realized sort of CEOs tend to have stronger networks than their technical counterparts. And so we thought that if we could try to force CTOs together and sort of that they would find some benefit as well. And this year, we're really looking forward to sort of having our second CTO Summit. So things like that have been a huge help as well.
Let's say, over the last few years, when you guys have had this idea and started to build it out, how do you retain the relationship, let's say, with the early stage founder now, where you maybe in the past you were participating with 1 or 2 or 3 other investors in an early stage round, and now it can be 10, 20. How do you keep that kind of relationship going?
Well,
because they can now, and a CEO can now be part of 20 networks, right?
That's our challenge. And our challenge is to, with every stage of sort of our business, is to be as helpful as we possibly can be, and that's sort of whether or not it's in a boardroom situation, or sort of in between boardrooms, or frankly putting together some of our community initiatives. And what I'd say is sort of the way we do is we really focus on sort of like treating it like it's a product. So we have, we think of it from the level of community management. What do we need to do to sort of get folks involved and connected with one another? So as they step back and they think about sort of the 20 networks that they're connected with, or the 20 firms they're connected with, that they still say First Round is where I feel like I get the most value, and those tools are sort of where they feel like they get the most value. And so it's funny. It really is for us sort of like we're a venture fund, but we're also sort of like operating this community as if we're a product company or a social company.
Absolutely. Well, great. Thanks for coming in and talking about the platform, and congratulations on building it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.